Jackson had never imagined that a simple genetic experiment would change the course of his life forever. He was a scientist from Earth, one of the few chosen to take part in a historic mission that would send him across the galaxy to a planet known for its advanced medical research. The planet was called Zolarian, a place where alien technology had thrived for centuries. The goal of the mission was to investigate a mysterious virus that had been infecting several planets, including Earth. The virus was spreading rapidly, and humanity was desperate for a solution. Jackson, a geneticist, was part of the team sent to study the virus's origins. But there was something different about this mission. It wasn't just about the virus. Jackson's DNA, which had been studied back on Earth, was the reason he had been selected. He was one of the few humans with an incredibly rare genetic anomaly, a pattern in his cells that seemed to have no clear origin. It was something that puzzled the researchers at home, and it was what made him the ideal candidate for the mission. When Jackson arrived on Solarian, the planet seemed almost too perfect. Towering crystalline structures shimmered under the pale blue sky, and the air was thick with the scent of exotic plants he had never seen before. Everything was clean, pristine, and utterly alien. He felt a strange sense of awe and fear as he stepped off the transport ship, unsure of what to expect in this new world. His first meeting was with Dr. Zara, an alien doctor known for her genius in genetics and bioengineering. Zyra was tall and slender, with smooth, silvery skin that seemed to glow slightly in the dim light of the research facility. Her eyes, a deep shade of violet, studied him intently as they shook hands. Jackson noticed how much she looked at him, almost too much, like she was searching for something. "We've heard a lot about you, Jackson," she said, her voice smooth but firm. "Your DNA is unique." Jackson felt a little uncomfortable, but tried to brush it off. "I'm just here to help with the research." Zyra didn't respond immediately. Instead, she motioned for him to follow her through the sleek hallways of the research center. The building itself was a marvel of alien architecture, with walls that shifted colors as they walked by, and soft blue lights that seemed to be built into the very structure. The place felt alive in a way Jackson had never experienced before. They reached a lab at the end of the hall, a large room filled with rows of equipment Jackson had never seen before. Alien technology covered the surfaces, humming with power, as if the whole lab was working in sync. Dr. Zara led him to a central station, where several monitors were already displaying data from Earth's research team. It was time to begin his analysis. For the next few hours, Zyra and Jackson worked together, analyzing human and alien DNA side by side. Comparing the virus samples with human genetic patterns, everything seemed to be going well. Jackson had always prided himself on his work, and here, in this alien world, he felt like he was on the brink of something groundbreaking. The alien species were far more advanced than humanity, and their technology and knowledge could hold the key to solving the viral outbreak back home. As the day went on, Jackson could feel Zara's eyes on him more and more. It wasn't just curiosity. There was something deeper there, something he couldn't quite understand. Every time she looked at him, her gaze lingered, and he began to wonder if it was just his own nerves, or if there was something more to it. Was she just focused on the research, or was there something else in his DNA that she was interested in? Finally, after hours of work, Zyra motioned for Jackson to sit down in front of a large display screen. "I'm going to run a more detailed scan of your genetic code," she said. "We need to be sure about the human side of the virus. I want to see if we can isolate the genetic factors that might be contributing to its resistance." Jackson nodded, leaning forward in his chair. He had undergone genetic scans many times before, but he couldn't help feeling a slight sense of discomfort as Zara initiated the process. The lab was silent, except for the soft clicking of the machines and the occasional hum of the data processors. He watched the screen closely, trying to focus on the task at hand, but something about Zara's intense silence was unnerving. As the scan began, Jackson noticed Zara's expression slowly changing. Her eyes widened slightly, and her mouth parted as she stared at the screen. She wasn't typing anything into the console. She was just staring, her violet eyes transfixed on the data as if it were some kind of forbidden secret. Jackson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Is everything okay?" he asked, trying to break the silence. Zahra didn't respond right away. She leaned closer to the screen, her hand hovering over the console, as if she were about to touch something delicate. Jackson couldn't make out the numbers or letters on the display, but he could tell by the way her fingers twitched that something was wrong. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she muttered, "This isn't possible." Jackson blinked, leaning forward. "What do you mean?" Zahra's gaze remained fixed on the screen, and for the first time, Jackson saw a flicker of uncertainty in her normally confident demeanor. "Your DNA," she whispered. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. This pattern, it's not human. It's something else." Jackson was confused. "What are you talking about?" "I've been studied before. I don't have anything abnormal, just the anomaly that's been in my family for generations." Zahra's lips parted again, but no words came out. She quickly typed something into the console, but the expression on her face didn't change. Jackson felt the room grow colder, the hum of the machines suddenly seeming too loud. "I don't understand," Zahra finally said, her voice trembling. "Your genetic structure, it matches something from a species that's believed to have been extinct for thousands of years." Jackson's heart skipped a beat. "What species? What are you talking about?" Zahra took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She was visibly shaken, but she forced herself to look Jackson in the eye. "The ancients," she said quietly. "A race that once ruled the galaxy. They were wiped out centuries ago, but their genetics, somehow they survived, and they are embedded in your DNA." Jackson's mind raced. The ancients? He had never heard of them. Could it be true? He felt his pulse quicken, and a sense of dread began to settle in his chest. He tried to process the information, but it was too much to take in. "But how is that possible? I'm human. I'm from Earth. I don't." Zahra raised a hand, stopping him. "It doesn't make sense. The data, it's impossible, yet it's right there in front of us. Your bloodline, it's connected to a race of beings that no one has seen for millennia." Jackson stood up abruptly, his mind swirling with disbelief. He needed answers, but none of this made sense. How could his DNA hold the key to something so ancient? How could he be connected to a race that had vanished from history? He didn't know where to start or what to believe. His entire life was built on science, but this was beyond his understanding. I need to process this," Jackson said, his voice distant. "Give me some time."
Zahra nodded, though her expression was still filled with doubt and confusion.
She watched as Jackson walked out of the lab, his mind racing. He didn't know what he had just stumbled upon, but he could feel deep down that his life was about to change in ways he could never have predicted. The question now wasn't how his DNA was connected to the ancients, but why, and what that meant for him, and for the galaxy. Jackson could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, his thoughts raced back to what Zahra had said. His DNA was connected to an ancient, extinct race, the Ancients. He had felt out of place in this alien world ever since he arrived, but now it felt as if the universe itself had tilted, and he was falling into some unknown abyss. Nothing in his life had ever prepared him for this. He was just a scientist, a geneticist. He studied DNA. He didn't belong to a forgotten race, nor did he have any special ties to the galaxy's long-lost rulers. But Zahra's words kept echoing in his mind. Your genetic structure, it matches something from a species that's believed to have been extinct for thousands of years, the ancients. How could that even be possible? Jackson was born on Earth, raised by human parents with a human life. His family was no different from anyone else's. Sure, there was the genetic anomaly that had puzzled scientists for generations, but even that wasn't supposed to mean anything like this. There had to be an explanation. It had to be a mistake. As he paced back and forth in his small quarters, Jackson couldn't shake the unease in his chest. He needed answers. He needed to understand why his DNA carried this impossible link to the past. What did it mean for him? What did it mean for humanity? He thought about Earth, his friends, his family. People who had no idea that their world was teetering on the edge of a discovery that could change everything. He couldn't just keep walking blindly into this. He needed to know the truth. He looked up at the clock. It was late into the night, or whatever passed for night on this planet. Zyra had told him to take time to process the information, but the longer he waited, the harder it became to find peace. There was only one way forward. He had to speak to her again. There was no turning back now. Jackson left his quarters, stepping out into the sterile hallways of the research facility. The soft hum of the alien technology was a constant presence, but tonight it felt more oppressive than before. He passed by the vast windows, looking out at the alien landscape beyond, an endless stretch of purple skies and glowing fields that seemed to go on forever. He had never been more aware of the fact that he was far from home, surrounded by beings whose knowledge and power were beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed of. When Jackson reached Zayra's lab, he took a deep breath before entering. The door slid open silently, and he stepped inside to find her seated at a console, her face illuminated by the soft blue light of the screens. She looked up at him, her violet eyes reflecting a mix of concern and something else, something he couldn't place. "Jackson," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "Have you had time to think?" He nodded, though his heart was pounding. "I can't stop thinking about it. What you said about my DNA. I need to understand. I need to know more." Zyra stood up, her movements graceful but hesitant. She seemed conflicted, as if she was caught between wanting to help him and fearing the consequences of revealing too much. She gestured for him to sit, and he did so, trying to steady himself. "I know this is overwhelming," Zayra said after a pause, "but you need to understand the gravity of what this means. Your genetic structure doesn't just contain traces of the ancients. It is, in a way, a living record of them." Jackson frowned. "But how is that possible? How could I be connected to them?" "I'm human, Zyra." She looked at him with a mixture of sympathy and sorrow. The ancients were not like us. They were not truly human. They were a race of beings with advanced genetic engineering, who could manipulate their own biology. Over time, their species disappeared, but their genetic code was left behind. Some of their DNA remained hidden in the fabric of the galaxy, passed down through different species, possibly even deliberately. And now, for reasons we don't yet understand, it has resurfaced in you. Jackson struggled to process what she was saying. "So, my DNA is some kind of genetic remnant of a species that's been gone for thousands of years?"
"Exactly," Zayra replied.
"But there's more. The ancients were known for their intelligence, their technological marvels, and their ability to create advanced bioengineering systems. They were the leaders of this galaxy, the first sentient beings, who helped shape the very foundation of the civilizations we see today. They disappeared after a cataclysmic event, but their legacy has been woven into the genetic material of many species, possibly as a safeguard. You are connected to that legacy in a way that no one has been for millennia." Jackson's mind reeled. He had always believed in the power of science, but this was beyond anything he could have ever imagined. It felt like the kind of thing that only existed in the realm of mythology. How could he, a simple human scientist, be tied to such a monumental history? "But what does it mean for me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why now? Why is this happening to me?" Zyra's expression softened. "That is what we need to figure out. The DNA that resides in you is not just a relic. It holds the potential to unlock abilities and knowledge that have been lost. It could be the key to understanding the universe's deepest secrets, or it could be the catalyst for something far more dangerous. We don't know why you, of all people, carry it. But your presence here is no coincidence. Jackson felt a chill run down his spine. The weight of her words pressed heavily against his chest. He had always believed that his work was important, that he was contributing to a greater cause. But this was something else entirely. He wasn't just a scientist anymore. He was a vessel for a legacy that could reshape the galaxy. "Are there others like me?" Jackson asked, his voice barely audible. Zyra shook her head. "No. We've searched for remnants of the ancients for centuries, but we've never found anyone who carries their genetic blueprint." "You're the first." He sat back, the implications of her words sinking in. He was unique, a living bridge between the past and the future. But with that uniqueness came an overwhelming responsibility. What if someone else discovered this power? What if they wanted to use it for something else? "I don't know what to do with this," Jackson admitted, his voice shaking. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a scientist. I don't have any special abilities, any knowledge of what the ancients could do. I don't even understand why this is happening to me." Zyra leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "Jackson, you have a gift. A rare and powerful gift. You may not understand it now, but you will. The galaxy is full of those who would want to use you for their own purposes. That's why I'm telling you all of this. You need to understand what's at stake." Jackson's mind was spinning. He had come to this alien world with one goal in mind, to help find a cure for a deadly virus. Now, it seemed like he was part of something much bigger, something that could change the course of galactic history. He stood up abruptly. "I need to think. I can't just sit here and let this happen. I need to find out everything I can about the ancients. I need to understand what they left behind." Zyra nodded, standing as well. "I'll help you. We have the resources here. We can find the answers. But we need to be careful. There are those who will try to stop us." Jackson felt a surge of determination. For the first time since he arrived on Zalarian, he knew exactly what he had to do. The answers were out there, waiting to be discovered, and he was going to find them. Jackson couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency as he paced through the research facility the following day. His mind was still reeling from the conversation with Zyra. He had known that his life was about to change, but he hadn't realized just how deeply it would affect him. Everything had become uncertain. His identity, his purpose, even his place in the universe. Zyra had offered to help him understand more about his genetic inheritance, and Jackson was determined to take her up on it. But as they sat down together in the lab later that day, he realized that the answers they were seeking were buried beneath layers of mystery. The ancient legacy he carried wasn't just some genetic oddity. It was a key, perhaps the key to unlocking the greatest secrets of the galaxy. Zyra's lab was quiet now, the humming machines and glowing screens casting a calm blue light. Jackson sat across from her, trying to steady his breathing. He had always been a man of science, someone who trusted data and logic. But what had happened in the past 24 hours was anything but logical.
"We'll start with the records we've gathered about the ancients," Zyra said, her voice steady.
"There's not much, but there are fragments. I'll show you everything we have." She turned to the console beside her, bringing up a series of holographic images. Jackson leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as the first image flickered to life. It was a map of the galaxy, thousands of star systems, interconnected by light years of distance. But one thing stood out, a small cluster of stars, marked in glowing red. "This," Zyra said, pointing to the cluster, "is where we believe the ancients originated from. The records are vague, but we know that they were the first species to develop advanced biotechnology and manipulate their genetics on a scale that no one else had ever done." Jackson studied the map closely. It was located far from Earth's solar system, in a part of the galaxy that had long been considered inhospitable. The stars there were old, their light faint. It seemed like the ancients had lived in the outermost edges of the galaxy, on the periphery of civilization. "What happened to them?" Jackson asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zayra's face darkened. No one really knows. The ancients were a peaceful species, or so the records say. They didn't engage in the kind of conflict that other species did. But something happened. A catastrophic event. Their entire civilization was destroyed. The records are fragmented, and no one has been able to figure out exactly what caused the collapse. What we do know is that their genetic legacy, their DNA, survived. And that's what's inside me? Jackson asked, a sinking feeling in his chest. Yes, Zyra replied, her voice filled with certainty. Your DNA carries traces of that legacy. But it's not just a random inheritance. Your genetic code is more than just a relic. It's a map, a blueprint for something much bigger. Jackson looked at her, his mind struggling to keep up. What do you mean? A blueprint for what? Zyra hesitated, her eyes flickering to the data on the screen. We believe the ancients left behind more than just their genes. There are theories that they encoded knowledge, technological advancements, biological secrets into their very DNA. If we can unlock the key to your genetic code, we might be able to understand what they left behind. It could be the key to unlocking powers, knowledge, technology that we've never dreamed of. Jackson felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. This wasn't just about finding answers anymore. It was about understanding a legacy that had been hidden for millennia. He had always thought of himself as a small part of the human race, a scientist who contributed to the world in small but meaningful ways. But now he was connected to something far greater. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, Jackson admitted, looking at the glowing data on the screen. This is too much. I'm just one man. How am I supposed to unlock something like this? Zayra placed a hand on the console, her eyes softening. I understand, Jackson. This is a lot to take in, but you're not alone in this. We'll help you. We'll figure it out together. We're closer to the truth than we've ever been. Jackson nodded, though doubt still lingered in his mind. He had never signed up for anything like this. All he wanted was to help with the virus, to do his part in saving Earth. But now he was caught in something far bigger than himself. He was a bridge between the present and the past, and the galaxy's future seemed to rest in his hands. Over the next few days, Jackson and Zyra worked tirelessly, delving deeper into the data. Every test they ran, every scan they performed, revealed more and more about the DNA he carried. It was as if his very cells were a map to some hidden treasure, one that had the power to change the fate of the galaxy. But the more they uncovered, the more Jackson felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. This wasn't just about science anymore. It was about history. It was about the ancients and their legacy. And it was about the danger that now loomed on the horizon. One evening, as they worked late into the night, the door to the lab opened with a soft hiss. Jackson turned to see a group of Zalarian officials enter the room. They were dressed in sleek, formal attire, their faces unreadable. Jackson immediately felt a sense of unease. He had seen them before, officials from the Zalarian Council, the ruling body of the planet. Zayra, one of them said, his voice calm but stern, we need to speak with you, and with the human. Zayra stood up, her expression guarded. What is this about? We've been monitoring your progress, the official replied. And we've come to a decision. The research you're conducting is far too dangerous. We cannot allow you to continue. Jackson's stomach churned.
What do you mean? We're on the verge of understanding something critical.
Something that could change everything. You can't just shut us down. The official's gaze hardened. The information you're uncovering is too powerful. It's not just about knowledge. It's about control. We cannot allow anyone to have that kind of power, especially not a human. Jackson's heart skipped a beat. What are you saying? You're trying to stop us from finding out the truth? The official didn't answer directly. Instead, he turned to Zyra. You have one chance to cease this research. If you do not comply, we will have no choice but to take more drastic measures." Zara stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "You can't do this. This isn't just about control. This is about the future of the galaxy. The ancients left behind something that could save all of us. You can't hide that from the universe." The official's eyes flickered for a moment, and Jackson could tell that Zara's words had struck a nerve, but the official quickly recovered, his voice colder now. "We're not interested in saving the galaxy, Doctor. We're interested in maintaining order, and that order is in danger now. Do not make the mistake of continuing this research." With that, the officials turned and left the lab, the doors sliding shut behind them. Jackson stood there in stunned silence, his mind racing. He had known that there were forces at play that wanted to control knowledge, but he hadn't realized how deeply the stakes ran. If the Zolarian Council was willing to go this far to stop their research, it meant that the secrets they were uncovering were more dangerous than they had realized. Zara stood still for a long moment, her face hardening. "They're scared, Jackson, and they're right to be. What we're uncovering isn't just knowledge, it's power, the kind of power that could change everything." Jackson felt a coldness settle in his chest. The council didn't want the truth to be revealed because it was too dangerous. But Zara was right. The ancients had left behind something more than just their genetic code. They had left behind a legacy of power. And now, it seemed, it was up to Jackson and Zara to uncover it before anyone else could stop them. Jackson sat in silence, staring at the data on the screen. The lab was dim, the only light coming from the soft glow of the monitors. He could hear the faint hum of the machines, the constant buzz of activity that filled the air, but it felt like the world had grown distant. Everything had changed in the past few days. The truth they had uncovered about the ancients, the dangers that now loomed, and the threat from the Solarian Council. It all weighed heavily on Jackson's mind.
He glanced at Zara, who was standing across from him, her hands clasped together as she stared at the data as well.
She had been his guide, his partner in this research, but now it felt like they were walking a tightrope, each step bringing them closer to something they couldn't control. "We need to move fast," Zara said quietly, breaking the silence. "We don't have much time before the council acts on their threats. They won't stop at just words." Jackson nodded slowly. He knew she was right. The council's warning had been clear. They were willing to go to extreme lengths to prevent the knowledge they were uncovering from being released. But what the council didn't understand, or perhaps didn't want to understand, was that this knowledge wasn't just a weapon. It was a gift, a key to understanding something far greater than themselves. "We need to find the next piece," Jackson said, his voice filled with determination. "The ancients left something behind. We've already uncovered a fragment of their genetic code. But there's more. There has to be more." Zara's eyes met his, and for a moment he saw the same fire in her that had been there from the beginning. She was not just a scientist, she was a protector of knowledge. And she was willing to risk everything to uncover the truth. "I think we're getting close," Zara said, tapping a few keys on the console. "The genetic map we've been studying? It's incomplete, but I've identified a pattern. There's a location, a place where the ancients might have hidden something crucial."
"It's not far from here."
Jackson's heart raced. The ancients had left behind a legacy that had the power to change the galaxy. But it wasn't just about knowledge or technology. It was something deeper, something that could bring about a new era, or destroy everything. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice steady despite the tension in his chest. Zara nodded. "I'm sure. The coordinates are within a nearby system. But we'll need to be careful. If the council knows we're onto something, they'll stop us. We can't let them catch us." Jackson's mind raced. They had no time to waste. They had already uncovered the first piece of the puzzle, the genetic code that connected him to the ancients. But that was just the beginning. What they were searching for now was the key to unlocking the full power of that legacy. "We need to leave now," Jackson said, standing up. "We can't afford to wait any longer." Zyra didn't hesitate. She quickly gathered the necessary data, making sure that everything they had uncovered so far was secured before they left the lab. Jackson followed her, his heart pounding in his chest as they made their way toward the transport ship. The facility was eerily quiet, the corridors empty. The only sound was the soft click of their boots on the floor. When they reached the hangar, Zyra immediately began preparing the ship for departure. Jackson stood by, watching her work. They didn't have a lot of time. The Council could arrive at any moment to stop them, and once they left the planet, there would be no turning back. "This ship should be fast enough to get us to the system we need," Zyra said, her fingers flying over the controls. "I've set a course. We'll be in and out before anyone realizes what's happening." Jackson nodded, though his mind was filled with doubt. He trusted Zyra, but the risks were enormous. If they were caught, there was no telling what the Council would do. They had already shown their willingness to resort to extreme measures to keep the secrets of the ancients hidden. "Are you ready?" Zyra asked, her voice steady but filled with an edge of urgency. Jackson took a deep breath, looking out at the stars beyond the hangar's viewport. For the first time in days, he felt a sense of clarity. They were about to embark on something bigger than any of them could have imagined, and there was no turning back. "I'm ready," he said, his voice firm. With that, Zyra initiated the launch sequence, and the ship's engines roared to life. Jackson felt the ship lift off the ground, rising into the sky, and for a moment, he allowed himself to relax. They were moving. They were on their way to uncovering the truth about the ancients, and nothing would stop them. The journey was fast, but the tension in the air was thick. Jackson couldn't stop thinking about the Council. They knew too much, and if they caught up with them, everything they had worked for would be lost. Zyra had assured him they would be safe, but Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The ship cut through the atmosphere, the stars streaking past them as they traveled deeper into space. Jackson sat in the pilot's seat beside Zyra, his eyes scanning the monitors, his mind running through every possible scenario. They had to make it to the coordinates Zyra had found. If they didn't, they would lose the opportunity to uncover the truth. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines. Jackson felt like he was in a trance, the weight of the journey pressing down on him. He thought about everything they had learned so far, the genetic legacy of the ancients, the Council's threats, and the knowledge that could change the future of the galaxy. It was a lot to carry, but Jackson knew that he couldn't turn back now. As they neared the coordinates, Zyra's voice broke the silence. "We're almost there," she said, her tone sharp. "I'm going to engage the cloaking system. We need to be invisible until we reach the location." Jackson nodded, his fingers gripping the edge of the seat as he watched the readings on the console. The system they were heading to was remote, isolated, and the perfect place to hide the secrets they sought. But there was still a chance that the Council had tracked their movements. If they were discovered, they would be in serious danger. "Ready when you are," Jackson said, his voice steady. Zyra initiated the cloaking system, and the ship's exterior shimmered briefly before becoming nearly invisible to the naked eye. The stars outside the viewport seemed to warp as the ship blended into the surrounding space. It was a strange sensation, as if they were no longer part of the universe, but simply existing in the space between. The silence in the cockpit was almost unbearable. Jackson could feel his heart racing as they approached their destination. This was it, the moment that could change everything. If they were successful, they would unlock the secrets of the ancients and uncover a power that had been hidden for millennia. If they failed, the galaxy would never know the truth. "We're here," Zyra said quietly, her voice filled with a mix of anticipation and caution. Jackson looked out the viewport and saw a small planet below them. It was uninhabited, covered in deep forests and rocky terrain. There were no signs of life, no indications of any civilization. But there was something about it that felt ancient, something that resonated deep within him. Zyra guided the ship down toward the surface, and as they descended, Jackson felt the weight of the moment settle on him. They were about to uncover something that no one had known about for centuries, but the question still lingered in the back of his mind. Was it worth it? Was the risk they were taking too great? The ship landed softly on the planet's surface, the engines powering down. For a moment, everything was still. Jackson and Zyra sat in silence, the tension in the air palpable. "This is it," Zyra said, standing up. "Let's go find the truth." Jackson followed her, his mind racing as they made their way toward the exit. The air outside was cool and fresh, and the ground was solid beneath their feet. It was a desolate place, but it felt like home in some strange way, like they were meant to be there. Together they walked into the unknown, ready to face whatever the ancients had left behind. The truth was out there, waiting for them to uncover it, and Jackson knew that no matter the cost, they would find it.